Welcome back, my frayers, to the show that never airs. I'm so glad you could appear. Come inside, come inside. Today is Halloween, or almost, and we are going to talk once more about Alice Cooper. I meant to do this video in March, but a lot of stuff happened in the last year. Look, a lot of stuff happened. Anyway, so back when Detroit Stories was still relatively fresh, it was still coming out, I remember hearing something. And it turned out to be wrong in the end. But I remember hearing something where there was an interview Alice gave, I think it was from 2019, where he talked about working with Desmond Child again. And that brought me back to memories of my sophomore year of college, when I turned to my roommate and I said to him, "Hey man, do you like Alice Cooper?" And he said to me, "Yeah man, I love his song Poison." Out of all the baby boomer artists to sell out in the 80s, Alice Cooper had probably the best reasons to do so. As much as I and many others enjoy the early 80s new wave Coop sound, those albums torched his reputation, winning him very few new fans and alienating a whole lot of the old ones. So when Alice finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel, cleaned himself up, got sober, found God, and looked to revitalize his career, he kinda had to start from square one. And the approach he took was to gun for commercial success. There weren't a lot of options in the 80s for a boomer artist, and he took what a lot of people wouldn't say was the obvious option, but when you look at who Alice Cooper is and the creative choices he's made throughout his career, it was a pretty obvious choice. He went hair metal. He released Constrictor in 86, Raise Your Fist and Yell in 87, and they weren't huge hits, but they put him back into the charts, because you gotta remember those last few Warner's albums didn't chart basically at all. And before I move on, I probably should clarify that Raise Your Fist and Yell and Constrictor are not great albums, but they're not terrible. They're not atrocious. They remind me a lot of the later Friday the 13th films. They have no real ambition. They're rude, crude, sleazy, and cheesy trash intended to put warm bodies in seats. Trash, though. Trash is a very different animal. This was his collaboration with Desmond Child because he wanted a hit. He wanted a hit, and those first two hair metal albums were not the hit. They were successful. They put him back in the middle level of the charts, but they weren't hits. And he wanted a hit. So he made this album with Desmond Child. Bon Jovi's on here. Joan Jett is on here. This album is... I don't like using the term sellout, because I think most of the time it has no meaning whatsoever, and people just throw it at artists who decided to play things a little more straight than normal. But Trash is the most dead-to-rights sellout album I've ever heard in my life. I listened to this thing the other night to refresh in order to do this review. I don't even know how I'm gonna review this thing, man, because it is so straight. It is a circa 1989 hair metal album with Alice Cooper doing vocals on it. That's all it is. He did get writing credits. He did write a lot of this stuff himself. It wasn't like Desmond Child did all of it, but there's a lot of other people's fingerprints on this project, and it's probably the most faceless thing he's ever done. I mean, he even looks ashamed on the cover. So yeah, let's review some Trash. I wouldn't normally do something like this, but in the spirit of the last artist I talked about on this channel, I'm going to be a little bit weird. I'm going to be a little bit random. I'm going to be maybe even a little bit off-putting to people who are going to watch this video, and I'm actually not going to review these tracks, because I've tried. I really tried. There's an hour of aborted footage of me trying to talk about these tracks. I even have a notebook with a script where I wrote about it. But it's just all the same, because this album This album is so straight. And I mean straight in like the Jazznik sense of like, these are all like mathematically derived, formula driven, late 80s hair metal pop songs. That is all that's happening here. That's all there is to say about it. It's Alice Cooper doing an album of commercial hair metal. The only particularly notable thing about it is that Desmond Child and Joan Jett and Jon Bon Jovi are on here, and that Alice kind of steps away from the spook show persona that had dominated his shtick for the last 18 years before this album came out, and steps into this weird, like, sexy goth dad image for one album that he drops immediately after this album. Anyway, yeah, it's a very, very uninspired album. When you have a guy like Desmond Child on board, your thing is going to be competent. Because Desmond Child is not a non-talented dude, He wrote several of arguably the best Kiss songs, He's done some decent stuff, some stuff I like. He's also done a lot of stuff I don't like. But, he's not an untalented guy. And the fact that this album works and is listenable is arguably because of that. But the thing is that the previous Alice Cooper hair metal albums, in many respects, arguably were not enormously listenable. They were not enormously successful. There's a reason, perhaps, that they did not climb as high up on the charts. But the thing is that gave them personality. It gave them something that they were. There are songs on those albums, on Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell, that I think are genuinely quite good, even if only because they're so ridiculous. Stuff like The Man Behind the Mask. There's a lot of tracks, there's a lot of kind of fun tracks on those albums. But this album doesn't have much like that. This is an album that I honestly can't see you getting much from if you don't love like Winger and Whitesnake and, again, Bon Jovi's later stuff. Although Bon Jovi is less hair metal, but that's a separate conversation. And I know people do. I know there are a lot of people who do. In fact, this is going to be a whole tangent, and I apologize for it. One of the most consistently fascinating things I have found in my experience as a music fan who is into metal and hard rock and such like, is that 80s metalheads, you would think 80s metalheads would hate hair metal, but you'd think they would see it as like this bastardization of everything that metal was, which in a sense it kind of is. In another sense, I can see the counter-argument, but that's besides the point. Anyway, you would think that. A lot of them don't, in my experience. A lot of them don't. A lot of them like hair metal. A lot of them really, really hate the way that hair metal got taken out of the picture by grunge, and see grunge as this sort of weird industry plot to steal away the Rock, the Mr. Big, the Winger, the Warrant, to steal the cherry pie from the American people and replace it with lithium. That was a joke that maybe 3 of you will get. Anyway, if you don't like hair metal, this is an album that's going to do nothing for you. I have a little bit of affection for some hair metal, but on the whole, not so much. And it's all right. It's okay. It's a 5 out of 10. It's probably the worst Alice Cooper album, I'm not even going to lie. Maybe not in a technical sense. I think there is, on a technical sense, an argument to be made that both Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell are worse. But to me, in terms of like, what do I remember from this album, this is the worst Alice Cooper album because I don't remember anything other than Poison. And yeah, happy Halloween. Happy October. We'll get a better video next year. I promise this every single year. Maybe next year it will actually happen. Anyway, I will see you all later. Have a good night.